Patrons!
Oh, hey guys, what's going on?
Let's talk about tongues and all the things you can use them for.
Ooh. My so on my other show, we were at some point in time talking about the band Cradle of Filth, and
Nice.
my friend Mikey described he said specifically that he did not like them or had avoided listening to them because they seemed licky. That's how he described them, as they seemed licky.
Licky. Okay. What does
And I
that
was
mean?
like, yeah, that's great. Like basically just like they're like gross.
Okay.
Like they stick their tongues out a lot and they lick things,
Okay.
licky.
You can you can use your tongue to talk, to sing, to taste foods. You can put it in people's orifices,
You
all
can you
kinds.
can you can stick it to a frozen pole.
You can stick it to a frozen pole. Unwise, but it can
Hmm.
happen.
Not to me, but to the kid in Christmas Story for sure.
Right. You can use it to just taste the air or show
Hmm.
people what your tongue looks like
Or catch snowflakes,
or
or
catch
to brush it.
snowflakes. You're doing so much better than I am on this list of things. Um,
You can
all right.
stick your tongue out at people to insult them.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. See, you're great at this. All right. Ready to do this?
Let's do it.
All right. Levels look good, I think. Okay. Three, two, one, go. Welcome to Why We Do What We Do Mini. I'm your host, Abraham.
And I'm Shane.
And this is a mini, so we're going to jump into it pretty quickly. But I'll let you know that this is a short form series we release on Mondays. And if you'd like to support the show, you can leave us a rating and review, like and subscribe, join Patreon, pick up some merch. I'll talk more about that at the end. We're talking about body parts today, or one body part in particular.
Yeah, we are talking about your tongue.
Now, we have talked about food, we have talked about chewing, we have talked about tasting, we have talked so much about the gastrointestinal or gastro aspects of being human in various ways, and we'll keep talking about them because there's kind of a lot there. But specifically, we're talking about tasting here and our the types of things that we can taste.
Yes, and so and specifically we are going to talk about the tongue map and that thing that persists where we have the bitter and the salt and the sweet and the umami and all the things that in the sour, all the things that go along on those different maps, those different regions of the tongue.
Yeah, this is a myth busting episode, so be prepared. Okay.
Yeah.
Taste is a funny thing. It is one of our driving factors around our choices of when and what we eat. But you might be then thinking about how does our tongue taste things? And you've likely seen a picture of this tongue that has a sort of map on it for where the different experiences of taste live. But the whole concept of taste by itself is very long and complex and interesting and possibly worth an entire episode length. But today we're just going to talk about the tongue specifically because there are other aspects to taste besides your tongue and this map idea here.
Yes. So if you look at a map of the taste receptors of the tongue, you'll see that our tongue is divided neatly into regions for specifically receiving taste profiles. So salt in the front, sweet just behind the salty, kind of towards the middle of the tongue, sour is on the sides, bitter is in the back of your tongue, like on the back of your tongue, closer to your throat, the back of your throat, and umami is in the very middle, meaty portion of the tongue.
Yes. Except that is 100% wrong. How would that even work? So, like, if you imagine if I took a sour candy and put it on the salty part of the tongue, would you not taste it? Of course not. That's not how that works. Now, the idea of the tongue map originated with German researcher David P. I'm going to say Honig, or something like that, in a 1901 paper with a German name I'm not going to try and read. But essentially, this is where he published it. He came up with this taste map based on other psychological studies, and he did these himself as well. And essentially, what he was doing is they were looking at different sensitivities to the flavors of salt, sour, sweet, and bitter. And he reported here that humans have higher sensitivities to different flavors at different parts of the tongue. And he drew this interesting schematic of the tongue. But what's important here is he was saying sensitivities, not exclusive regions of. So it'd be like you'll taste a salty thing anywhere on your tongue, but it seems to be particularly sensitive toward the front of your tongue, is sort of how he described it.
Right. And so those flavors that he found that we had sensitivities to were salt, sour, sweet, and bitter. And he depicted this in a crude diamond-like tongue drawing with lines delineating the various sections of the tongue. And so when you look at it, it looks like basically there's the tongue and there is a singular point in the middle, and then there are dotted lines that go out from that to kind of divide it, almost as if the beams from Dark Tower were dividing the earth.
That is actually a very good analogy. Yes, if you've read that
Yeah.
series, that is what this looks like.
All things serve
Um,
the beam.
exactly right. So he had this idea. He basically tested this. Other people tested this, and he just reported how the fact that there are certain parts of the tongue where people seem to be more sensitive than certain flavors than others. But of course, you use your whole tongue to taste everything. But there might be parts that maybe have a slight speciality there. Then Edwin G. Boring comes along in his 1940 book on perception, and he really oversimplifies this tongue map into these very discrete tasting areas, showing essentially not only that they're more sensitive, but that's the only thing that you can taste on that part of your tongue, and the only part of your tongue that you can taste those particular flavors. And this was based on nothing. He completely made this up. He just took the work that was done by that German psychologist and was like, I'm just going to rewrite this. And he sort of taxonomized the tongue into these very specific, neatly linear outlined spaces.
Could you imagine going to a lecture from Dr. Boring? What are you doing today? I'm going to a boring lecture, yes.
Oh, man. Speaking of boring, here's some ads.
Nice.
All right, we're back. We've been talking about this idea of the tongue map that started with ranking sensitivities and then moved to like clearly delineated taxonomies with no overlap.
Yeah, so at this point in time, research has powerfully and thoroughly debunked this idea of this tongue map. Not only do we have different taste receptors all over our tongue, we can even taste in our gums and the roof of our mouth. Even when researchers deadened the nerves that carry taste, patients still accurately reported some tastes.
Yeah, so like it's clear the tongue map is wrong. You can deaden the nerves of like salty, the salty part of your tongue, quote unquote, and they'll still taste salty, of course, because we've got these taste bud receptors all over our whole entire tongue. And although they might be more sensitive to certain flavors than other, they are taste receptors. They get everything. So for some reason, this idea has not only made a comeback, this idea of like the taste map with these clearly delineated places, but it's even being taught in schools, almost certainly Florida schools.
Sure,
So
of
if
course.
you have been taught this, you have been lied to. And you don't even have to take our word for it. Go do your own experiment. Put different flavors in different parts of the tongue and see if they magically disappear depending on where you put it. Now, of course, don't eat anything dangerous. Don't do this with Tide Pods. Don't try and make someone else do this. Do it with yourself with actual food that's safe to eat and that you're not allergic to, and just try it. And you will see that you can taste everything on every part of your tongue, although there might be parts that are a little more sensitive than others, a little more.
Right. Now, we do have different taste receptors. That is true. Some receptors may be somewhat more narrow with respect to what flavors they are sensitive to, and some people are more or less sensitive to flavors in general. So it's not just that that like every human is sensitive to this particular flavor. Like there are some people that can't stand sour. There's some people that can tolerate way more sour flavors and different types of flavors that they experience. So it's really kind of unique to every person.
Exactly. And our taste receptors, as I mentioned, they're all over our entire tongue. It really wouldn't make evolutionary sense to have taste receptors divided into isolated parts of our tongues. Like, why? Why? Our tongues help reinforce eating behavior, which is good when you're in a food scarce environment, such as our ancestors would have been, and maybe less good now. But it is generally good for most creatures that they have that sense of taste. Our tongues also help us determine the relative nutrient quality of the food that we're eating and the safety of that food. That is, like, if you're eating something that has noxious flavors or like chemically tastes, then we're likely to spit it out because our taste buds are warning us this is probably not something you should be putting in your mouth. So our
Right.
tongues kind of have a variety of reasons, and our sense of taste likely has the benefit, the evolutionary benefit, of warning us when we're eating something that is going to be dangerous.
Right. Now, children do tend to be less tolerant of bitter flavors and are more motivated to consume sweet and fatty flavors. But the difference likely has to do more with our experiences and culture as we learn to enjoy flavors that we would have hated as kids, such as coffee, tea, beer, and wine, things like that.
Yeah, exactly. So just as a thing to note. And then, of course, animals are going to have different taste receptors based on the kinds of foods that they consume. So, for instance, obligate carnivores such as cats, they might at night, beep, they might actually not have taste receptors that can detect sweetness. Isn't that wild? Because they would
Yeah.
never need to seek out sweetness as part of their diet. And it's not like it's necessarily toxic to them either. At least many of them wouldn't be, but they probably taste the toxic parts if there were something toxic. But like they're not gonna their chewing behavior is unlikely to be reinforced by sweetness because they're obligate carnivores. They only eat meat.
Right, absolutely. So why does this thing keep coming back? Like, if we've debunked this, shouldn't we, as a scientific nation and as a scientific community, have accepted the fact that the tongue map does not exist?
Ha! I wish. I think one reason that this likely persists is that I think we tend to enjoy simple, elegant, organized designs. I think there's an appeal to it that helps us look at the world and say, I see how this thing is sort of segmented. I see how this works. And it feels good to have something that looks tidy and neat like that.
Right. It also has a surprising wow factor that has us feeling like we learned or that we learned something new. So you get this kind of like this really quick snippet of information that sounds really scientific and sounds like it could be plausible, and you go, "Oh yeah, this is great," and you start sharing it, and like we've said before, misinformation or a lie can walk around the globe before the truth has time to put its shoes on,
Yeah.
or whatever. I know I butchered that phrase, but like it's one of those things where it's just like it's so easy to disseminate so quickly.
Yeah, yeah. It sounds like, oh wow, that's interesting, and you could sort of see it making sense. It's like people say that I think it's we yawn because our brain isn't getting enough oxygen. That's not true. That's not why. Try stifling a yawn and see if you die of asphyxiation. But uh, the yawning is complex, but it's not because our brains lack oxygen. But that has a similar sort of wow factor where people are like,
Right.
oh, I get it. Like that's why. And so then they're responding to something that gives them an explanation about something they didn't have an explanation. But the other thing is like it feels intuitive. I think this idea of the tongue map, we can kind of like glom onto that idea because it doesn't feel like a stretch. And we might notice that we feel really tart sourness, mostly like the sides of our mouth. We might notice that we get a strong sense of bitter in the back of our mouths. And so, like, we can glom onto these ideas because our experiences can corroborate to some extent the claims that are being made. The claims that are made are not 100% wrong. They're also just not 100% right. I did say they're 100% wrong
Right.
before, but it's more about the fact that like there are different sensitivities. But again, that also does have to do with the cultures that you're raised in, like the different flavors that you're used to. And I think a lot of people will have had the experience that traveling to other cultures, they eat foods and they're like, oh, how could you eat that? And the people there are like,
Right.
this is my absolute favorite dish. So like what you grow up with will help shape those experiences. And I think our tongues do have these somewhat specialized regions, kinda, but our tongues are completely covered in taste buds and they used to great effect for evolutionary purposes.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, hopefully another myth busted. I think that is all we have to say about tongue maps. They're wrong. Stop telling people that they're right because they're wrong, and you're wrong for telling them that they're right. And if you believe it or you've been heard this, you've been lied to. We're telling you the reality now. So go forth with that knowledge in your mind. Is there anything that I missed or anything you'd like to add, Shane, before we wrap this one up?
Nope, I think that covers it.
All right, I'll do the quick social media plug obligation things, which is that if you'd like to support us, you can leave us a rating and review. You join us on Patreon, which means you get behind the scenes content, and I'll read your name on full length episodes. You can email us to tell us your experiences about tongue maps by emailing us at info@wwd.wwdpodcast.com. And you can reach us on the social media platforms, including Blue Sky. We're over there. But I think that is all that we have to say here. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for recording with me today, Shane.
Anytime.
All right, this is Abraham.
This is Shane.
Why We Do What We Do Mini is out.
Bye.
Perfect.
All right.
Raise.
Look at us. We did it.
Did the things. I think we're exactly a week ahead on minis, and we're just on track for full length.
Okay, cool.
Because we'll have the one that we recorded on Friday comes out this week, and then we recorded today goes out next week.
Okay, cool.
So,
all right. Very good. Well, I will get these uploaded to you.
okay, sounds good. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Do you need anything from me at all?
A stop recording for patrons. Bye, patrons.
Bye, patrons.